I had always been a curious person. Maybe that's why I noticed the strange glow coming from the old house next door. The place had been abandoned for as long as I could remember, a crumbling relic of a bygone era. No one ever went in or out, and the windows were perpetually dark, until now. One night as I was heading to bed, I saw it, a soft, almost ethereal glow coming from the house. It was a cold winter night, and I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. But then, I heard it too. Faint, almost imperceptible singing like a distant choir. I couldn't just ignore it. The glow and the singing became a nightly occurrence, and my curiosity got the better of me. I decided to investigate. I told myself I was just going to have a quick look and nothing more. The next evening, armed with a flashlight and a sense of adventure, I ventured out. The air was crisp, and my breath formed clouds in the cold night air. I felt a strange mix of excitement and fear as I approached the old house. The front door was surprisingly easy to open, creaking loudly in protest. Inside, the air was musty, and the faint scent of decay lingered. I followed the glow, which seemed to be coming from the living room. What I saw there made my heart skip a beat. In the middle of the room stood a Christmas tree, glowing with an eerie light. It wasn't just any tree, though. This one was adorned with delicate hand-carved skulls. They were intricately detailed, each one unique, and they glowed with an unsettling light. The singing grew louder as I approached the tree. It was hauntingly beautiful, a melody that sent chills down my spine. I couldn't understand the words, but the tune was mesmerizing. As I reached out to touch one of the skulls, the glow intensified and the singing seemed to surround me. I quickly pulled my hand back, feeling a strange energy coursing through me. I decided I had seen enough and hurried out of the house, my heart pounding. That night, I couldn't sleep. The glow and the singing haunted my thoughts. I kept telling myself it was just a trick of the light, maybe some old decorations left behind, but deep down, I knew there was something more to it. The next morning I noticed something strange. The glow seemed to have followed me home. It was faint, but I could see it out of the corner of my eye, flickering in the shadows. I tried to ignore it, but it was always there, a constant reminder of what I had seen. I started to see the glow in other places too, in the kitchen, the hallway, even in my bedroom. It was as if it was watching me, waiting for something. The singing too seemed to follow me, a constant haunting melody that I couldn't escape. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't live like this, constantly on edge. I decided to go back to the old house and find out what was going on. Maybe there was some explanation, something that would make sense of it all. This time I was more prepared. I brought a camera and some tools, hoping to document whatever I found. As I entered the house again, the glow and the singing welcomed me back, almost as if they had been expecting me. I made my way to the living room, where the tree still stood, glowing with that eerie light. I took out my camera and started taking pictures, hoping to capture some evidence of what I was experiencing.
As I examined the tree more closely, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Each skull had a name carved into it, along with a date. Some of the dates were recent, while others went back decades. I felt a shiver run down my spine as I realized what this meant. These skulls were more than just decorations. They were a record of something, maybe even a warning. I decided to leave, but as I turned to go, I felt a strange pull, like something was keeping me there. The singing grew louder, more insistent. I tried to resist, but my legs seemed to move on their own, taking me back to the tree. I reached out again, unable to stop myself, and touched one of the skulls. This time the glow enveloped me completely and the singing filled my ears. I felt a wave of dizziness, and then everything went dark. When I came to, I was back in my own house. The glow was gone and the singing had stopped. I felt a sense of relief, thinking it was all over. But then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. In the corner of my living room stood a small Christmas tree, glowing with that same eerie light. It was adorned with tiny hand-carved skulls, each one bearing a name and a date. I realized with a sinking feeling that I had become part of the phenomenon. The glow and the singing hadn't just followed me, they had claimed me. I was now a part of the eerie mystery, another ornament on the cursed tree. I knew I had to do something to break the curse, but I had no idea where to start. The glow and the singing were constant now, a haunting presence that I couldn't escape. I felt like I was losing my mind, trapped in a nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I started researching the history of the old house, hoping to find some clue about the tree and the skulls. I spent hours poring over old newspapers and records, trying to piece together the story. It turned out the house had a dark past. There were rumors of strange rituals and disappearances, but nothing concrete. The more I dug, the more I felt like I was being watched. I could feel the presence of the glow and the singing, always just out of sight, always just out of earshot. It was driving me to the brink of madness. One night, as I was going through some old documents, I came across a journal. It belonged to the previous owner of the house, a man named Robert. In it, he detailed his own experiences with the glow and the singing. He had been trying to unravel the mystery too, but his writings became more and more disjointed as time went on. It was clear that he had been driven mad by whatever was in that house, but there was one entry that stood out. It was written just before he disappeared, and it mentioned a way to break the curse. He spoke of a ritual that needed to be performed, a way to cleanse the house and end the phenomenon. I knew it was a long shot, but I had to try. I gathered the materials Robert had mentioned and made my way back to the old house. The glow and the singing welcomed me back, as if they knew why I was there. I followed the instructions in the journal, performing the ritual with as much precision as I could muster. As I finished, I felt a strange sensation, like a weight lifting off my shoulders. The glow flickered and then dimmed, and the singing faded into silence. I stood there for a moment, hardly daring to believe it was over, but as I looked around, I saw that the tree was still there, still adorned with those cursed skulls.
I realized that while I had performed the ritual, I hadn't broken the curse. The glow and the singing were gone, but the tree remained, a reminder of what I had become a part of. I left the house, feeling a sense of defeat. I didn't know what else to do. The glow and the singing might be gone, but the memory of them would haunt me forever. I had become another ornament on the cursed tree, and there was no escaping it. It was a Friday evening, and I was looking forward to having the house all to myself for the weekend. My parents were going out of town for a business trip and wouldn't be back until Sunday night. Being a teenager, I was thrilled at the idea of some independence and freedom. I had already planned out my weekend, watching movies, eating junk food, and maybe inviting a couple of friends over. The first night was pretty uneventful. I ordered pizza, watched some action movies, and played video games until late. By the time I decided to go to bed, it was past midnight. Around 2 a.m. I heard a faint noise coming from downstairs. It was so quiet that at first, I thought I had imagined it. I paused the video I was watching and listened carefully. For a few minutes there was nothing but silence. Just as I was about to hit play again, I heard it. A soft but distinct creaking sound, like someone was slowly opening a door. I grabbed my phone and tiptoed out of my room, trying to make as little noise as possible. The hallway was dark, and every step I took seemed to echo through the silence. I made my way to the top of the stairs and peered down into the darkness below. The living room was pitch black, and I couldn't see anything. I stood there for a moment, straining my ears for any sound. Through the small window in the back door, I saw a faint light moving outside. It looked like someone was walking around with a flashlight. Panic surged through me. I quickly turned off the kitchen light and crouched down behind the counter, peeking out the window. The light was getting closer, and I could make out the figure of a man. He was tall and wearing a dark hoodie. I took a deep breath and dialed 911, my hands shaking as I held the phone. The operator answered, and I quickly explained what was happening. She told me to stay on the line and that officers were on their way. I felt a little relief knowing help was coming, but I was still terrified. A few minutes later, I heard a noise coming from the back door. It was the sound of the doorknob turning, followed by a soft thud as if someone was trying to force it open. My heart felt like it was going to explode. "Please hurry," I whispered into the phone, my voice trembling. The operator assured me that the police were on their way, but it felt like time was moving in slow motion. The noises at the back door continued, and I was certain the man was trying to break in. I wanted to run to hide somewhere safer, but I was frozen with fear. Then, just as suddenly as it had started, the noise stopped. I waited, holding my breath, listening for any sign of the intruder. The silence was deafening. After a few moments, I heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Relief washed over me as the police car pulled up in front of my house. I stayed on the phone with the operator until I saw the flashing lights outside. I heard the officers announcing their presence and calling out, "Police! Is anyone inside?" I finally felt safe enough to move. 2 officers were standing there, and I quickly explained what had happened. They told me to stay inside while they checked the perimeter. I waited anxiously in the living room, watching as the officers searched the yard and surrounding area. After a thorough check, they came back inside and told me that the intruder was gone. They hadn't found anyone, but they did see footprints in the backyard, leading to the side of the house, and then disappearing into the woods. The officers took my statement and assured me they would patrol the area throughout the night. They also recommended that I call my parents and let them know what had happened. After they left, I called my parents and told them everything. They were understandably worried and offered to come home early, but I insisted I was fine and that the police were keeping an eye on the house. They agreed to check in with me regularly and suggested I stay with a neighbor for the rest of the weekend. I decided to take their advice and called Mrs. Jenkins, our next-door neighbor. She was a sweet old lady who had known me since I was a kid. She was more than happy to let me stay with her, and I packed a bag and went over to her house. The rest of the weekend passed without incident, but I couldn't shake the feeling of fear and unease. Every little noise made me jump, and I barely slept. By the time my parents came home on Sunday night, I was exhausted. They were relieved to see me safe and sound, and my dad immediately started looking into getting a security system installed. Within a week, we had cameras and alarms set up all around the house. It made me feel a little better, but I knew I would never forget that terrifying night. The experience left a lasting impact on me. I was always on edge when I was home alone, and I found myself double-checking the locks and windows more often than before. I couldn't help but wonder who the man was and why he had targeted our house. The police never caught him, and the case remained unsolved. It was a Friday night, and I had the house to myself. My parents were out of town for the weekend visiting my sister in college. They'd asked me to come along, but I had work and some other stuff to take care of, so I stayed behind. I was looking forward to a relaxing weekend alone. Watching movies, playing video games, just chilling. It started off normal enough. I ordered a pizza and settled in for a night of binge-watching my favorite show. Around 10 p.m. I heard a knock at the door. It was weird because I wasn't expecting anyone. I got up and looked through the peephole, but there was no one there. I figured it was just some kids messing around and went back to the couch. About 15 minutes later, there was another knock. This time it was louder and more urgent. I looked through the peephole again, but still, no one was there. I was starting to get a little creeped out, but I told myself it was probably just some teenagers playing a prank. I tried to ignore it, but then my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. The message read, "Why don't you answer the door, Jake?" My heart skipped a beat. How did this person know my name? I typed back, "Who is this?" but got no response. I decided to call the number, but it went straight to voicemail. The knocking continued, louder and more insistent. I was starting to panic a little. I grabbed a baseball bat from my closet and went to the front door, determined to scare off whoever was out there. When I opened the door, there was no one in sight. The street was empty, and everything was quiet. Too quiet. I felt a chill run down my spine as I stepped outside to look around. The porch light flickered, casting eerie shadows on the lawn. I was about to go back inside when I noticed something on the ground. It was a small, black notebook. I picked it up and flipped it open. The pages were filled with handwritten notes, but they didn't make any sense. At the bottom of one page, I saw my name again, followed by the words, "You're not alone." I dropped the notebook like it was on fire and rushed back inside, locking the door behind me. My mind was racing. Who was messing with me? I checked all the windows and doors to make sure they were locked, then tried to calm down. I decided to call the police. I told them about the knocking in the notebook. They said they'd send someone to check it out, but it might take a while because they were dealing with other calls. I didn't know what else to do, so I just sat on the couch, clutching the baseball bat and waiting. The knocking stopped, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every little noise made me jump. I kept checking my phone, but there were no more texts. I felt like I was going crazy. About an hour later, I heard a car pull up outside. It was the police. I let them in and told them everything that had happened. They looked around the house and checked the yard, but they didn't find anything unusual. They took the notebook as evidence and told me to call if anything else happened. I tried to relax after they left, but it was impossible. I kept replaying everything in my head, trying to make sense of it. I eventually fell asleep on the couch, exhausted. The next morning I woke up to another text. This one said, "Had a good night, Jake?" My hands were shaking as I read it. I called the police again and told them about the text. They said they were looking into it and that they'd keep an eye on my house. I decided to stay home that day. I didn't want to leave the house and come back to find something worse. I kept the doors locked and tried to go about my day, but I was constantly on edge. That night I was determined not to let whoever was messing with me ruin my weekend. I tried to watch a movie, but I couldn't focus. Every little sound made me jump. I kept looking at my phone, waiting for another text, but it stayed silent. Around midnight, I heard a noise coming from the basement. It sounded like something was moving down there. I grabbed the baseball bat and went to check it out. The basement door was closed, but I could hear faint shuffling sounds on the other side. I took a deep breath and opened the door. The basement was dark and I couldn't see anything. I felt around for the light switch and flicked it on. The light flickered for a moment before staying on. I walked down the stairs slowly, my heart pounding. When I reached the bottom, I didn't see anything out of the ordinary. The basement was just as I'd left it. I was about to go back upstairs when I heard the noise again. It was coming from the far corner, near the old storage boxes. I approached the boxes cautiously, the bat raised and ready. As I got closer, I saw one of the boxes move slightly. I held my breath and slowly lifted the lid. Inside, there was nothing but old clothes and toys. I was about to close the box when I noticed something strange. One of the toys, a stuffed bear, had a note pinned to it. The note read, "I'm always watching." I dropped the lid and backed away, my heart racing. I ran up the stairs and locked the basement door behind me. I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped in my own home. I called the police again and told them about the note. They said they'd send someone over, but it would take a while. I didn't want to wait. I needed to get out of the house. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. As I reached for the handle, my phone buzzed. It was another text. This one said, "Leaving so soon?" I froze, my hand on the door. How did they know I was about to leave? I turned around slowly, my eyes scanning the room. I didn't see anyone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I took a deep breath and opened the door. I stepped outside and looked around. The street was empty, and everything was quiet. I got in my car and drove to a friend's house. I didn't feel safe staying at home anymore. I told my friend everything that had happened. He let me crash on his couch and promised to help me figure out what was going on. We stayed up late, trying to come up with a plan. The next day we went back to my house together. I didn't want to go alone. We checked the place from top to bottom, looking for any clues. We didn't find anything, but I still felt uneasy. I decided to set up some cameras around the house. Maybe I could catch whoever was messing with me on tape. My friend helped me install them, and we tested them out to make sure they were working. That night, I stayed at my friend's house again. I didn't get any texts, but I couldn't stop thinking about what was happening. I kept checking the camera feeds on my phone, but everything looked normal. The next morning, I went back to my house to check the footage. As I was going through the recordings, I noticed something strange. Around 3 a.m., the camera in the living room picked up some movement. I watched the footage closely, my heart pounding. At first I didn't see anything, but then I noticed a shadow moving across the room. It was faint, but it was there. I rewound the footage and watched it again. The shadow moved slowly, like someone was creeping through the room. I called my friend over and showed him the footage. He agreed that it was weird, but we couldn't figure out what it was. We decided to set up more cameras and see if we could catch anything else. Over the next few days, things seemed to calm down. I didn't get any more texts and the knocking stopped. I started to relax a little, thinking maybe it was all over. But then one night, I woke up to the sound of someone whispering. I sat up in bed, my heart racing. The whispering was faint, but I could hear it clearly. It was coming from the hallway. I grabbed my phone and checked the camera feeds. In the hallway, I saw a figure standing there. It was just a shadowy outline, but it was definitely a person. They were standing still, facing my bedroom door. I froze, not knowing what to do. The whispering continued, growing louder. I could make out some of the words, but they didn't make any sense. It was like they were speaking in another language. I called my friend, my hands shaking. I whispered into the phone, telling him what was happening. He said he'd be over as soon as he could and told me to stay put. I kept my eyes on the camera feed, watching the figure in the hallway. They didn't move, just stood there whispering. I felt a chill run down my spine. I didn't know how long I could sit there and wait. After what felt like an eternity, I heard a knock at the front door. My friend had arrived. I didn't know how I found the courage, but I got up and opened my bedroom door. The hallway was empty, but the whispering had stopped. I rushed to the front door and let my friend in. We checked the camera feeds together, but by the time he got there, the figure had vanished. He could see the same shadowy figure in the recording though, and it freaked him out too. We called the police again and showed them the footage. This time they took it more seriously. They sent a couple of officers to stay at the house overnight to see if they could catch whoever was doing this. My friend and I stayed in my room with the door locked while the officers kept watch. I barely slept that night. Every little noise made me jump. Around 3 a.m. I heard a commotion downstairs. They'd caught someone trying to break into the house. When we went downstairs, we saw a man handcuffed and sitting on the living room floor. He looked disheveled and out of it, like he hadn't slept in days. The police said he'd been living in the woods behind my house and had been watching me for weeks. They found a small camp with notebooks full of creepy messages and drawings, all centered around me and my house. My friend stayed with me for the rest of the weekend and I didn't get any more texts or see any more shadows. When my parents got back, I told them everything. They were horrified and wanted to move immediately, but I convinced them to wait. The police assured us that the guy was in custody and wouldn't be able to bother us again. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every time I walked past the spot in the hallway where I'd seen the figure, I felt a chill. I set up more cameras and double-checked the locks every night. It's been a few months since it all happened and things have mostly gone back to normal. But I still get nervous when I'm home alone. I can't help but wonder if there are others out there watching and waiting.